You're watching Black the Vote Digital Housing Forum. My name is Katrina Holland, Executive Director of Community Alliance of Tenants.
And I'm Hannah Holloway, Policy Staff with the Urban League of Portland.
So as you know, there is a lot wrapped up in this November's election. Our values as Oregonians are on the ballot. The housing crisis continues to crumble our communities. And so a group of us Black-led organizations came together to have some real talk with candidates and with people in the know about some of the issues on the ballot. Issues like Black houselessness, issues like access to home ownership, renters, luxury units that are vacant while homeless people are sleeping on the streets. And so we really wanted a chance to dive in and ask some really tough questions. We hope that you'll learn a lot.
Also, a quick note, we as nonprofits take our C3 statuses very seriously. In that effort, we made every attempt to get all candidates to this forum. We made repeated phone calls, emails, moved our schedules and our formatting around in an effort to get everyone here. So the candidates that you will hear from are the candidates who were able to make time for this Black Housing Forum.
We hope that you enjoy. Feel free to share it, send it to your friends, send it to your family, ask tough questions, and make sure that you get out your vote on November 6th. Thank you for coming, Patrick.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
We're so glad that you came.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Patrick Starnes. I'm the independent candidate for governor. I have over 10 years on school board experience, and that's what sort of engaged me to run for governor, seeing no solutions coming from Salem, but lots of problems. You know, we're really low in our graduation rates, and there's a whole host of other issues that we will talk about that are not so good either. So
Yeah.
I look at myself as a problem solver. As a cabinet maker for over 30 years, I've been building things and making things happen, so I hope to do that with Oregon too.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for running. Yeah. And just a quick note for everyone, we know that this looks a little bit different than the other candidates. Unfortunately, we ran into a hiccup. And
I did, yeah.
Patrick's
too many miles on my vehicle.
Too many miles on the vehicle, and got stuck in Eastern Oregon. So we are right now at the Oregon League Minority Voters Dinner. We decided to bring the camera equipment here to make sure that Patrick
Thanks
had an
for being
opportunity.
flexible, yeah.
Of course, thanks for coming.
We're all coming here anyway, so it worked out.
So it worked out. So we'll just dive in. We'll talk a little bit about the Fair Housing Act, Black houselessness, Black homelessness, access to home ownership, and also being renters. So the first question is, given that the Fair Housing Act has to some now been weaponized against the Black community and the Equal Protections Clause that hinders race-explicit policy to help address or right some of the wrongs that have happened in the past, how will you create policies that directly redress disinvestment and exploitation of Black communities?
Yeah, and we see this across the state actually. What I've been learning is that gentrification is colorblind. So it affects the Latino communities, it affects poor working white folks in the rural areas. When the areas are gentrified, all those workers that are changing beds and doing the dishes and gas station attendants, they're affected to this. So my proposal for an Oregon Shelter Fund is unique to the other candidates. I'm actually coming up with new revenue sources that will help us solve some of these problems. And it'll build affordable housing, and it'll also subsidize rent, so we can have help with our rents, keep our rents reasonable. Because we can't just put it all on the private sector. The state has to step up. And as governor, whenever I come up with an idea to fund something, like you heard me earlier, you have to have if you want to pay, you want to spend money, you have to come up with a way to fund it. And what I propose is a vacancy fee, because if you know in your neighborhood, as well as when I travel across the state, there are vacant abandoned homes all over the state and in communities of color especially. They call it zombie homes, and sometimes they're empty for 10 years. And often they're owned by out-of-state banks, like Deutsche Bank and stuff, we've been finding. So we need to develop a carrot and a stick, an incentive to get these homes and these houses and commercial properties back into circulation so that people can afford to live in them. And the vacancy fee would do that. So after a certain amount of time, they would be required to pay per square foot a fee to have it vacant. So that we want to build in that incentive. And what's important about that fee and that revenue would go into the Oregon Shelter Fund. So The revenue needs to be related to the service. That's what I
Mhm.
feel. Like the gas tax pays for roads.
Mm-hmm.
This vacancy fee would keep things from being vacant
Got it.
and affordable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So those state initiatives like individual development accounts that currently exist right now were created to reduce racial disparities in home ownership. The vast majority of state IDA dollars do not go to Black or other culturally specific housing programs. Will you commit to working with Oregon Housing and Community Services to create an equitable, anti-racist distribution of IDA dollars?
Yeah, I would probably hire you to come up with, seriously, you know your stuff. I would hire you to come up with a solution for that. And we
There's
would,
plenty of other people,
yeah,
trust
well,
me.
or whoever you recommend
Of course.
to be the leader on that and to know the nuts and bolts of it, and I'd stand behind it 100% because this equity issue is terrible and we've got to stand up and deal with it.
Agreed.
Yeah. We
So-
can't dodge it.
Yeah. So let's talk.
We can't accept big money from realtors
Mhm.
in order to get elected because I'm limiting my donations and it's not from big realtors. So.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good segue into the next question.
Oh,
Let's
good.
talk a little bit about no-cause evictions, which I'm pretty sure you've heard about. And
Yeah.
in Eugene, it's a big issue.
I'm clearly against it.
Mm.
And for the first time in our lives, my wife and I have been renters all of our lives,
Mhm.
except for when we lived with our folks, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time ever, we have a rental in Eugene,
Mm-hmm.
and as renters, we are completely against no-cause eviction. We just don't get it.
So you would support a just cause standard, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah, and I would also lift the ban on the statewide rent controls.
That is such a good segue, because that's
Oh.
the other thing. So rents are ridiculous in Oregon, we've known that for a long time.
Yeah,
People getting 100%.
as renters, we all know.
Yeah, 100%, 250, 300% rent increases. And so right now there's discussion about a proposal that would limit the frequency and amount of rent increases statewide.
Mm.
A rent stabilization policy. Would you support that? And what would you need to see in order for you to champion that kind of proposal?
Well, I would need, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, so
Mhm.
I apologize for
That's okay.
being naive about it. It sounds good because we need to get behind something that makes it easier for lower working class folks. I call it the working poor. I've been in that category, We make under 30,000, we make minimum wage, and that's a huge section of our population. And so they can't be spending over 30% of their income on shelter.
Mhm.
So we do need to have help, and as a governor, I would completely get behind an effort to help that.
That's awesome.
Because these workers give their lives to their jobs, and they provide so much service, and we have to be there for them.
We do.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Black houselessness. It often looks like people doubling up, not necessarily in the streets. So staying with family members. What actions will you take to surpass the challenges of serving this undercounted population in order to help solve Black houselessness?
Yeah, like I said before, we have to have some designated funds
Mm-hmm.
to help with affordable housing across the state.
Across the board, yeah.
Just, and it would especially help these people that are doubling up. Because not only does the vacancy fee affect those old Safeways that have been closed for over 10 years, or an old zombie house on the corner of the neighborhood, it affects the people like Buehler and others that own extra homes. So some of us can't afford one home, and then there are others that have a home in every corner of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So the vacancy fee would affect them too.
I see.
Because if they have all this extra square footage, I say, then they need to pay extra to help those that don't have any square footage.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you were saying, if families are doubling up, then that's not enough square footage per person,
Mm-hmm.
per family.
Right.
And we need to build more square footage. And what's ironic about this issue in Oregon, we're the timber capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We grow all this wood, we make it, and that's what my dad did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a cabinet maker,
Mhm.
and we're not building enough housing.
Yeah.
So the biggest job for me as the governor is to connect all those dots.
Right.
Because we can see this and we can see that, but it takes that leadership and that creativity and not being attached to any special interest groups to connect these dots and solve these problems. And
Right.
I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Awesome. So let's talk numbers a little bit.
Okay. The deep end of the pool.
The deep end of the pool. So there are approximately 15.5% of the population that are people of color. So
Okay.
that's Latino, Native
Across
American,
Oregon.
across
Okay.
Oregon,
Mhm.
African American, etc.
Asian, yeah.
Asian, etc. However, they comprise 30% of the renter population.
Mm.
And if we look at African Americans specifically, 64% of African Americans
Okay.
are renters.
Good.
What's going on here?
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
we fix
they
this?
need home ownership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we want to encourage. Because not only do we want to build these new structures that are affordable, but we want to also provide more job training and more skills to these folks to be able to get better jobs. So it's a holistic approach. It's not just housing and the Oregon Shelter Fund,
Mhm.
but it's so much job training is there's a gap. I mean, in 10 years, we're not going to have enough electricians and plumbers. When I tried to get when I tried to get an electrician to work on our house, because that's one thing I don't do is electrical, they told me there's a shortage of 100 electricians just serving the Eugene Springfield area. And I can imagine it's way huger here
Wow.
in Portland metro area. So these are jobs waiting to happen.
Yeah.
You know, we just need to, again, connect these dots, these young people or even older people.
Mhm.
You know, I'm 50 plus, I need to get my skills up to speed. You know, with the high-tech world in the 21st century, we need to have education not just be K through 12 or college, but lifetime learners. We all want to be lifetime learners, so we're always improving ourselves so we can contribute more.
Right. Well, that's all the questions that
Okay.
I have for you today. Is there any
Good
other
stuff.
final comments that you'd like to give to the folks watching?
Well, I would just, this is more personal to you and your organization. I would just like to work closer together and getting these numbers and these vacancies and connecting these dots. So, and anyone else that's watching this, if they have a passionate issue as well that could be different than this, to reach out to me. You know, when you get in the voters pamphlet, you see my phone number. It's right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm answering my own phone,
Yeah.
and you email me, and I answer my own emails. So that direct connection to constituents, like one of the other candidates was talking about, is crucial for democracy.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time today.
Thanks
really
for your
appreciate
flexibility
it.
with
Of course.
my drama. With
We make it
transportation.
happen. No
Yeah,
worries.
transportation is a big part of that equation too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have food deserts because people can't get across town
Yep.
to the good food. So having the junk food pay into an Oregon Health Fund that can also help with food deserts,
Mm.
so that we're not just buying junk all the time, which I love junk food, but
It is good.
yeah. But you have to have that carrot and stick again to get us to eat healthier and also to fund healthcare for everyone. So I propose a Oregon health plan for all,
Yeah.
and it's transferable no matter what your job is.
It's good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And a way to pay for it. What a concept.
What a concept. Well, thank you, Patrick.
All right, thanks. Good
Enjoy the
job.
rest of your night.
Yeah. Go.